pretty back and forth on having time to do these videos, plus also being sick with some type of bladder infection or something. I don't know what it is. So what's up, Yugi Bros? It's Connor with another Duel video. Today we're actually doing a 3 out of 5 with 2 decks, and I'll show you what they are in just a second. So we are playing Viral Infection, no pun intended to my stomach. We're playing zombies. We're playing the good old Skull Servant build with this skill. The skill says once per turn we can discard any number of cards and declare one type of card, monster, spell, or trap. Your opponent then sends one card of the declared type from their deck to the graveyard for each discarded card. If you do that, flip this card over. So once per turn we can flip this, send any number of cards from our hand to the graveyard, declare monster, spell, or trap, have them milled at the same number that we discarded, less thinning their deck and or potential strategies they may have, and us fueling our graveyard for zombie type things like Book of Life, for example. We elected to go first. Our opponent is playing Catch of the Day. If you control the Legendary Fisherman, you can activate Yumi directly from your deck or graveyard. This skill can only be used once per duel. So keep in mind, the only skill here that's once per duel is this one. The rest of this thing says, once per turn, when the Legendary Fisherman you control destroys a monster by battle or inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can special summon one level 4 or lower water monster from your deck in or graveyard in defense position. I kind of wish it said attack position. I don't think that would make it overpowered considering you have to play the Legendary Fisherman in your deck, but it is what it is. So they want to go second anyway. It's water. That's how water works. We want to go first to set up and get our Skull Servants in the grave as fast as possible. So we'll start things off here with an Allure of Darkness. We're going to draw into a Dekoichi, and a Goblin Zombie. Will banish the Goblin Zombie since we already have one. Plus, once you already have one, you Book of Life loop it usually, or Haunted Shrine or whatever. So once you have one, you're good. We're playing Dekoichi in here for extra draw power, and you'll see why in a second. So we activate another Allure. We'll banish the Dekoichi this time because we don't need that. We'll set the Goblin Zombie and pass. They draw into the Legendary Fisherman too. Keep in mind this card's name becomes the Legendary Fisherman while on the field or in the graveyard, so you can use the skill with it. Because, let's be fair guys, this one is clearly just better than the original. The upsides to this is while Yumi is on the field, this card is unaffected by their monster effects. That's real good against Relinquish. If this face-up card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent card effect while its owner controls it, you can add a level 7 water monster from your deck to your hand. Keep in mind, the current level 7 water monster that exists in speed and that we are playing in this deck is Levia Daedalus the Sea Dragon, which, if anyone remembers, if you have Yumi on the field, you can send it to the grave for that boy, and that boy wipes the board. That card's real powerful in a deck that's really non-existent, but I'll tell you, man, if water just got like 1 or 2 cards, a Legendary Ocean Konami, just saying, card would be a lot better. So they draw on a Legendary Fisherman. Deck's real proficient in trying to get it out first turn, so they're going to activate Water Hazard, which lets them special summon a level 4 lower water from their hand. And then you get to send that for this. The reason this deck is playing normal monsters is because I wanted just really strong beat sticks, especially with Yumi up. With Yumi, this is 1800. With Yumi, High Tide Gyrogen is, I think, 1850, which actually beats out Zoma, which is nice. Sometimes this is better than a Crash Zoma. But either way, special summon a monster, tribute summon it for Legendary Fisherman number 2, activate the skill. Now, because we control Legendary Fisherman, they're going to activate Yumi from their deck. Now this guy goes up to 24 and is unaffected by other monster effects. And they're going to set offerings and go into the battle phase and have this boy swing into our zombie. We get our Skull Servant, but unfortunately they get exactly what they want, which is a level 4 lower water monster from their deck. We're playing this a little bit differently. I guess they technically could have played Yomi's ship, but the way this build is playing, it's just a bunch of beat sticks, so the normal monsters are real proficient here. However, this deck is also maining Order to Charge, so it's real fun to bring this out if you have a set Order to Charge, and then it's just a free destroy. In addition to your Offerings to the Doom. You don't play Mat 3 in this because you kind of need your draws, but you know. So we're going to draw into Skull Servant. So at this point, we will go into our main phase, activate our Viral Infection, sending 3 Skull Servants to the graveyard, and calling Spell. This gets rid of 2 cards that they arguably don't need anymore, obviously, because they have one here and they have this here. But Order to Charge, we've already started to hit their relevant cards, so Spelt was a good call on our part. And it puts everything in the graveyard so that we can then set a Dakoichi, activate Book of Life, and banish the Crazy Fish from their graveyard. Keep in mind, Book of Life needs to target both a zombie in your grave and a monster in your opponent's grave for it to activate. So you'll always need a monster in their graveyard, but even if they don't have one, you can just simply Viral Infection 1 card, call a monster, have them send a monster, and then Book of Life is live. It's probably the most live playing 3 has ever been for me. So, keep up with King of the Skull Servants. This card gets 1,000 attack for every Skull Servant and King of the Skull Servant in your graveyard. We currently have 2 Skull Servants, so he's at 2,000. We're going to use this little marker to determine that. And we'll have King swing into High Tide. We can't kill this thing yet, but they flip Offerings to the Doomed. And unfortunately for us, King's other effect, if it dies by battle and sent to the grave, you can banish a King or a Skull Servant from your grave to special summon it. This is only by battle. So this isn't going to stop something like Offerings from the Doomed from straight getting it off the field. So we are forced to pass. They skip their draw phase due to Offerings. They'll switch their High Tide to attack mode. They'll have their Legendary Fisherman swing into our Dakoichi. We'll get our draw, but they'll get their effect, which is the whole point of their deck. And then their High Tide swings into us for 1850. We draw into a Lure, really clutch draw. We're going to activate it, drawing both King and Book, banishing the Goblin Zombie. This is pretty good. Now we have 3 Skull Servants in the grave since they destroyed one of ours. So that puts this guy out at 3,000. Then we will go into battle phase, swing over the High Tide Gyojin. The reason we don't swing into this is because if they add Levia to hand, chances are if they either draw a monster or have a big wave, small wave in hand, we don't know if they do or not, but the odds seem kind of good if they're playing 3. We don't want to take that chance and them drop Levia and then pop the board and swing for game, since this won't be able to revive itself. So we figure a safe route is to swing over the normal monster instead. And when we have enough firepower, we'll go in for a complete assault. They draw into another Legendary Fisherman 2, which is doing nothing for them, so they'll switch their other one to defense mode. We set Haunted Shrine. Little downside to Haunted Shrine is just the simple fact of you have to control no monsters to use either effect. And the problem there is that if you always have a monster on the board, chances are it's going to stick. Against something like Levia Dragon, for example, it's actually quite worse because it'll nuke the entire board, including this, and you won't get a chance to activate this. This is a little bit better against something where if they just straight attack over it or Relinquish takes it, then you can bring back another zombie from your graveyard. So it's a little awkward. We're going to activate Book of Life, bring back Goblin Zombie in defense mode just as another defense, and banish a High Tide from their graveyard, and then we'll have King swing over their High Tide. And they draw into Crazy Fish. They're going to switch their Legendary Fisherman to attack mode. I kind of understand why they kept this. This hole is one combo to summon this turn, or as fast as possible, so if this does kill it. Also, if this dies, they get Levia, so this plus this and Levia is free board wipe. So I understand why they'd keep the Crazy Fish. They need to keep a monster for Big Wave, Small Wave to be live for the Levia play. So it's understandable. And it's not like they're in any immediate danger anyway. Plus, Legendary will swing over our zombie and get another normal monster. So they're sitting pretty on defenses. We draw into King, so we're going to use Viral's effect to send the regular Skull Servant for another spell. They send another to Order to Charge. That boosts this up to 4,000 attack. And then we drop the other 4K beat stick. So the plan is to go in, however, we won't be able to go for game, unfortunately, here. Even if we pitched this one and put this up to 5,000, that would have been 28 over this, and they have 2850, and we know full well if they get the Levia next turn, with 5 cards left in the deck, we are pretty certain they have a Big Wave, Small Wave at this point. So we are actually going to just pass here after we kill the High Tide. They draw into another Legendary Fisherman 2, which does nothing for them. At this point, they set their Crazy Fish, because either one of these is game if they don't have directly 2 defenses for it. We draw into Despair from the Dark. We'll activate the skill. We'll call Spell, sending an Offerings from the deck to the graveyard. Despair does nothing in our hand, so we're going to then have King swing over their defense and pass. They draw into Metal Reflex Slime, which I think is actually a really cool tech. and works really well with Big Wave, Small Wave. You can wall for a while and then Big Wave the Metal Reflect into either this or a Levia Dragon. We draw into Dekoichi, which does nothing for us. We only have one card left in deck, so the plan here is to try to deck them out. I wish we kept this Haunted Shrine in hand, honestly. We're going to pitch our Dekoichi, and at this point call Monster, which I think is a little late. Maybe we should have done this a little bit earlier, because if we knocked the Levia out of their deck, chances are we wouldn't have had to worry then if we killed this. But they send a Crazy Fish to the grave, so they still have the Levia. We're going to then go into battle phase, have this swing over the Legendary. They don't use the effect, because if they added Levia, assuming this is the Levia, to their hand and then go into their turn, they'll have no cards left in their deck and they'll lose the game. So that's very smart on their part. And then, of course, we have this try to swing in for game, and they flip the Metal Reflex Slime, and we unfortunately have to then attack into that. They draw into their final card, Levia Dragon, but go figure, they have no way to summon a little water monster onto the field to then Big Wave, Small Wave into this. So unfortunately, they are forced to pass, and we will take game 1 with our Skull Servant Mishmash deck. I don't know why they took 24. There we go. Okay. I was like, well, we do have another attack in case. This deck's interesting. Obviously, it hinders off the discard effect of Viral Infection. If you didn't have that, you could play something that discards a lot, like, I don't know, Magic Jammer, Tribute to the Doomed, but those are all cards you have to draw into, and I'd rather always just have a skill ready to be able to pitch to do it, rather than rely on something to draw to discard. Otherwise, I'd be slowly setting Skull Servants down, and the game would go by really, really slow. So they'll swing into our Goblin Zombie, we'll search our Skull Servant, and they'll pass. We draw into Offerings to the Doomed, we activate Viral, we'll send a Skull Servant, call a Monster, send a Crazy Fish to the graveyard. We need that monster in their grave so we can Book of Life our Despair that we pitched last turn, a real easy way. What's nice about this card is it provides tempo to this deck that otherwise wouldn't have any, because if you're literally just stalling to get your King of the Skull Servants big, how are you dealing with their board outside of just like Offerings to the Doom and stuff? That's not actually dealing anything as well as damage, but with the Despair thrown in here, you can easily put this in the grave as fast as possible, activate Viral, send a monster to their grave, Book of Life this back, banish their monster, and put a 2800 beat stick on the board, which also has 3000 defense. Little known fact for the people that are playing Sphere Karibo to try to block this thing's attack. Unless it's Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth, they're not getting over this, which is really nice, through battle anyways. We're going to set Offerings, we're going to have Despair swing. Unfortunately, they have Offerings, so we get nothing out of it, but they don't draw. They actually set Order here, but they don't summon the Legendary Fisherman, probably because they want to maximize this thing's ability to then get Yumi. And if if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have Offerings, but we don't use it because this card's not an immediate threat. Plus, we would like to draw. Go figure we draw Book of Life, but this time they don't have a monster in their graveyard, and we're not going to pitch Book of Life to make that happen. So we have to pass. They're going to draw in a Creature Seizure, which is a nice tech that they sided in. It's really cute. It also gives this deck another element playing the normal monsters that lets you play this and Fostane Bargain. Fostane lets you send a special summon monster on the field, on either field to the grave to summon a level 4 or lower from your hand. This lets you creature swap, but your monster has to be a normal. So it gives this deck a little extra element that it wouldn't have otherwise, that you wouldn't really get with like any of the regular water monsters. Granted, I do believe Yomi's ship probably should have been in this deck, and it wasn't. But having these normal monsters at your disposal to use other effects with is kind of cool, and their beat sticks with Yumi is out as well. They're going to swing again, and we're going to take it because we want any card so we can pitch for the skill. We draw into Zombie, perfect. Let's use Viral, let's pitch this, let's call Monster. They send Crazy Fish to the graveyard. We Book of Life, bring back Despair for the second time, banish the Crazy Fish, go into the battle phase, swing into the High Tide, and of course they have it. Order to charge. Well, they did have 2, so I guess it really doesn't matter. But they do lose their monster this time around. But they do get to draw, however, it's Water Hazard, so they're forced to pass. We draw into King of the Skull Servants. We'll drop that boy on the field. Coming out at 2,000 for 2 Skull Servants. Can I get an amen? Skull Servant swinging in for 2,000, and they got nothing to stop us. So we pass. They draw into Metal Reflex Slime. What a perfect opportunity. We'll draw into a lure. We'll YOLO a lure, because why not? We draw into Dekoichi and King. So we'll summon another King and another 2,000, and then either of these attacks is lethal. They're going to flip Metal Reflex Slime to wall us, but we have Offerings to the Doomed. No harm done. We swing in for that 2,000, and damn, we take a 2-0 start. Alright, going into Game 3. Like I said, guys, this is going to be a 3 out of 5. I don't want to do 3 matches. I feel like that's kind of ridiculous. But we're going to try to get a 3 out of 5 under 20 minutes. And as you can tell by the timestamp, we got that. Hopefully I'm not lying. We're going to start with a lure, drawing 2, banishing Goblin Zombie, setting 2, and our Skull Servant as a defense and passing. They draw into the High Tide, they activate the hazard, but we play the Dust Tornado that we sided in. It's actually really good there. So that won't resolve, so they're just going to normal summon their High Tide and set in Offerings and swing into our monster. Good thing it's not Legendary Fisherman though, otherwise we would have been really behind. We draw into Allure of Darkness. We're going to set Book of Life, draw into 2 darks, however we have to banish that Skull Servant. So unfortunately, we are forced to pass. We have Book of Life. We could, in theory, viral this Book of Life, sending a monster to the graveyard, but really just to bring this back, is it worth it? I don't know. I don't think it's worth it as of yet. We have Dust Tornado. We don't actually have defenses, but unless they put huge numbers on the board in one turn, I think we'll be okay. They summon their second High Tide. They're going to swing in with both of them, and that will quickly put us down to 700 life points. We're going to draw into Despair from the Dark, which is kind of nice here. We're going to Dust Tornado their back row, which happen to be Offerings. We're going to viral the Despair, calling monster, having them send a monster. Then we'll activate Book of Life, bringing back Despair, banishing the crazy fish, and allowing us to get a 2800 beat stick on board to swing with. They're going to take that damage and pass. Things are looking bleak for water. But what's this? They're going to Tribute Summon for their High Tide. They're Tribute Summon their High Tide for their Legendary Fisherman 2. They're going to then activate the skill, putting Yumi directly from the deck or graveyard to the field. They're going to then activate Big Wave, Small Wave, destroying all water monsters and summoning Levia from their hand. They're going to activate Levia. We don't have a response to this. This will blow the board and thus a quick win for water. I couldn't believe it when it happened. It was actually really amazing to watch. Alright, so 2-1. We're still leading this match, but let's see what we can do with this game. We're going to start with Goblin Zombie down. We're going to viral this Skull Servant for a monster. We're going to set Offerings and pass. I think the game this time is we're going to keep calling monster. We're going to let the spells go, and if we can eventually get them down to either no monsters or no tributes, or put the Levy in the graveyard, we seem pretty good with that. This time they're going to Water Hazard, and it's going to resolve. They're going to summon High Tide, set Order, and Reflex Slime. It's a really good opening for them. And they're going to swing into our Goblin Zombie. We will gladly take that, allowing us to add a Skull Servant, and letting us go to our turn. We draw into Despair. You guys know how this goes. We're going to viral Despair and Skull Servant. We're actually going to call monsters. We said spell, and then it was like, oh, wait, no monsters. Sorry. Like I said, we're on the monster plan this game. We'll see how this goes. So they send 2, including a Legendary Fisherman. Interesting. Pretty early. We're going to normal summon King. He'll come out at 2, because we have 2 Skull Servants. And then we have an Offerings to back ourselves up. We're going to swing into the High Tide. They're going to order to charge that. So it gets rid of their monster and ours, but they don't have a monster now. They draw into Offerings. They'll set that and pass. We draw into Book of Life. This time they have monsters in their graveyard because we've been calling the monster out. Also, calling the monster out early means that we don't have to then depend on drawing another card to make this live. It's just already going to be live out of the gate, which is really nice. We'll bring back Despair. We'll banish their Legendary Fisherman, which I think is real clutch. And then we'll swing in for 28. They're going to flip Metal Reflex Slime. Go figure, that's actually going to wall this. But we have the Offerings. We figure let's use it here to try to get 28 in. And then the Offerings us. So unfortunately, nothing happens. And both players are going to then skip their draw phase. So they pass, we have to pass, and then it goes back to them. They draw into another Big Wave, Small Wave. That's going to do nothing for them. And then we draw into King. Go figure. This boy's coming out big. 3K. We already got the 3 skulls to make him big. So we're going to go into battle phase and swing. And just like that, they only have 1,000 life left. gonna draw an offering, set it, and pass. We draw into Allure of Darkness. We're not going to YOLO Allure. There's really no reason to. I hate YOLOing Allure in this deck and then banishing a King of the Skull Servants. That's the worst feeling. If it's a Skull Servant and you already have like 3, like I said, like right here, it's not the end of the world because you get 1 card. But if you draw into a King of the Skull Servants and you're forced to banish it with Allure in this deck, it's just not worth it in my opinion unless you're desperate. So we're going to try to swing here. They're going to Offerings to the Doomed. But they don't get to draw, so they are forced to pass. They're going to bluff a big wave, small wave. We then draw into a second Allure, which is real sketch. We're going to set an Allure. We could have YOLO'd one, but we figure we'll wait instead. They draw into High Tide. They're going to normal High Tide, which I guess they could have used Water Hazard for, but whatever. They're going to swing, and we have to take that. We're going to draw into Offerings. We're going to set that. We're going to set Allure, activate Allure. Draw 2. Unfortunately, these will have to get discarded because we didn't hit a dark. We're going to YOLO the second Allure. We hit a Skull Servant. Like I said, in this situation, it's not bad. So I netted a Dust Tornado. And we milled 4 cards out of our deck. This does, however, put us at 5. And this is something we always have to make sure we don't lose by decking out. So we have a Dust and Offerings. We're okay. We can actually take another attack if we want to. We're going to do that because they draw into Creature Seizure, which does nothing for them. So we're down to 700 once again. We draw into Book of Life, probably the best thing we could have drawn. We'll Dust Tornado their face down and make sure it doesn't destroy the monster we then bring back with Book. We'll use the Book. We'll banish their High Tide. We'll bring back our King, because at this point, King's at 3,000. It's stronger than Despair and has the extra bonus effect. Despair does nothing for us on the board, except to have 3,000 defense. But we haven't seen a Sphere Karibo yet. And we're going to swing it to High Tide, assuming they don't Sphere Karibo, and they don't, and that's game. For the Skull Servant deck, we were playing triple Skull Servant, triple King of the Skull Servants, triple Goblin Zombie to get the Skull Servants, so essentially 9 Skull Servants. 1 Despair from the Dark. When you draw it and it's in the graveyard, it's good and live for these. Triple Dekoichi. This is the easiest side out if you want to bring in more relevant things like we did with Offerings and Dust Tornado. The alternative is you can also bring in Eudoria to get extra monster removal, but also be another target for Allure as well. I really like these. It's like playing 3 more Upstart Goblin that's sideable, and you don't even care if you don't see them. You don't miss them at all. But it's just really good. Then you can play exactly what you need for exactly which situation and matchup you're in. Triple Allure to get the maximum of these as fast as possible. Triple Book of Life. I actually don't mind this. I thought I was going to think this was a bit much. I didn't think this was nearly enough. Once you have it, plus Viral Infection, always putting a monster in your opponent's grave, this card is always alive, and I really, really like it. This card, however, is really, really not live a lot of the time, at least in that matchup. I'll have to try it out in other matchups, but, you know, you get 2 effects out of this card, so I don't feel like you need more than 1. But also an easy side out. This plus these equals any 4 of these. I think what we did was we brought in these 4 in that match, but never brought in Eudoria. But that's the deck for Skull Servants. Alternatively, for the Legendary Fisherman deck that we called Aquaman, we play 1 Daedalus to search triple Aquaman, who searches Levia and also is the whole ringleader of the deck. Triple High Tide, it's just the strongest level 4 water monster that we currently have. Triple Crazy Fish, it's the 2nd strongest with better defense compared to, I think, Great White. 1 Yumi, you don't need more than that. The skill gets it from your deck or grave. I think in one game we actually milled this with Viral Infection because we knew we'd get it back once we flipped the skill. Double Water Hazard, this is an easy side out, but this card lets you summon these quicker to then summon this. This does the same thing with Big Wave, Small Wave, but this is also really good for this card. I almost might want to play a second Levia, having this type of setup, and I might go 3-1. I don't know, that seems a little risky. But I might play a second one just because there were situations where you saw that this could have died and we already had added this or something. So, I don't know. It's a work in progress. Double Offerings because I feel like this deck needs it, but the problem is this deck also needs a draw phase, so we pair that with Double Order to Charge with these, which is really nice. But also what's nice about this is it doesn't target, which is cute. And then the 1 Reflex Slime for extra defense and playability through Big Wave, Small Wave. In the side deck, we play 1 Fuss Stain Bargain and 1 Creature Seizure. Both of these really good with normal monsters, as well as these as well. Kind of gives this deck an extra element, which is nice. This one removes Special Summon Monster from either side of the field by sending it, which is really strong. So if you send Relinquish, for example, their Illusionist Faceless can't come back, which is really good. But also just really good spot removal as well for a normal monster in your hand. This one, like I said, is Creature Swap, but you need to give them a normal. That's not hard in this deck. especially when this sets it up beautifully. And then 2 Twister, 2 Dust for the matchups like Zoma, Nightmare Wheel, Parasite, Paranoid, etc. But yeah, guys, what'd you guys think about these 2 rogue decks? Did you like, love, or hate any of our card choices? Would you change anything? Please leave your comments down below. As always, like, love, and subscribe. Click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates. Did I just say like, love? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just said that. Whatever, we're gonna roll with that. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Yu-Gi Bros out.